things that Rabbi Chernick does, but he's been a longtime member of the synagogue and has longtime teacher at the synagogue. But beyond that, he's professor emeritus of rabbinic literature at Hebrew Union College. So the emeritus in Jewish jurisprudence and social justice. His expertise is the Talmud, in particular legal hermeneutics as applied to the Bible. He received his doctorate in rabbinics and his rabbinic ordination from Yeshiva University. And he's written extensively about Jewish law, numerous books and articles. And I see here he's also founded the Summer Jewish Studies program at Kibbutz Yahel, which I looked up as the Reform Kibbutz in Israel, near not far from Eilat. Anyway, it's our pleasure to have him today, and I think these sessions are going to be on the narrative, art of the narrative of Talmud. It's all yours.
So, it is going to be about the narrative, the artistic narrative of the Talmudic story. If you take a look, I've got the material both in English and in Hebrew. Mostly, I'm going to be doing the reading in Hebrew. If there's any point that you want me to stop doing that and make some comment on the translation, which I hope is close enough to the original, then I will, clearly stop and we can talk about things. The reason I want to do this in Hebrew is because there are a lot of puns. There are aspects of the story that you're not going to really get if it's read in the English. I'm not trying to distance everybody from participating in this, which is why I gave the material out a little bit earlier so you could get the lay of the land here. But let's get started. Usually I have people read, so I'm going to have people read now, and I'll go back to the Hebrew as is necessary. How about that? That is as a way of doing things. So I can see almost everybody. Let me check. Okay. How bizarre. I don't know who 11JU is. There are a lot of people that are hiding from me. Okay. I can please try to put on your faces, because it's from the teacher's point of view, it's always good to see what the reactions are. Okay, having said that, why don't we get going with Norman Levin, whom I know from other places. Start with the familiar and then work my way around. Yeah, okay.
That's right, Michael. Start with an apikoros. Go ahead. Okay.
Whatever.
All right. Tanu Rabbanan, Lola Mihi Adam.
No, use the English for the time.
Okay.
I'm going to go back and.
Okay, fine.
Right.
Our rabbis taught one should always be pliable as a reed and not be as hard as a cedar. Once it happened that Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon came from Migdal Gedor, from the home of his teacher. He was riding on a donkey following along the shore of a river, and he was exceedingly happy. He was extremely proud of himself because he had learned a great amount of Torah.
Okay, it doesn't sound so terrible, but when you get to the Hebrew, it's a little bit more pointed. It says Tana Rabbanan was taught in a Baraita, which is a non-Mishnaic piece of literature that comes from the same time as the Mishnah. It says, "La'olam yehei adam rach kekaneh v'al yehei kasher ke'eles." Same as what you have in the English. Nobody should ever be anything more than soft like a reed and not hard like a piece of cedar wood. It says, now, there it is. They're telling you that really a person should be humble. People should be nice to one another and soft in relationship to each other, and not hard-nosed and difficult with one another. Now we're going to get the story that either proves that or disproves it. So it says, Masa Shabbat, Rabbi Lazar ben Rabbi Shimon, Mimigdal Gedor, Mibeit Rabo. So we don't know exactly where Migdal Gedor is, but it's probably not a real place. And probably you always have to ask yourself, when there's a story being told to you by the Talmud, is it really a story about this person? Or has this person been picked for a specific reason? And that's why the story is about him. In other words, are we dealing with history here? Or are we dealing with something else? The narrative, the literary approach to the narrative assumes that there's no history that can be seriously learned from the Talmudic narrative. That's a big argument in the academic community, and I don't think we have to necessarily spend a lot of time figuring out who's fighting whom on that front. But at any rate, we should pay some attention to the names. So it's Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon. And Elazar means God will help, or God has helped. And Shimon, can anybody tell me what the root of Shimon is? You don't, it's not an ABC.
Shema.
Like here?
Shema, yes, hearing. So there's a little bit of help of God that's going to be involved here. There's going to be something that's going to be heard. Now the person is coming from this protagonist, Elazar ben Shimon, is coming Mimigdal Gedor. Now the word Gedor actually means a fence. So Migdal is of course a tower. So the tower is a tower that somehow fences something in. But we're going to find some towers here in the story, and we're going to find the necessity for a fence. So Migdal Gedor, whether it's a real place or it's not, really has the function of talking about something that's very high and something that is fenced in. So he was coming from Migdal Gedor, from the home of his teacher, Mibeit Rabo, V'haya Rachuv al Chamor, U'metayel asfat Nahar. And he is kind of leisurely going on the border or shore of a river. Now, if you place him in relationship to the river, is he higher or lower, or even?
If Miguel is high, then he's starting at high, I would think.
He's higher, okay? His donkey is not crawling on the riverbed or river shore, but he's very leisurely and he's going along on this donkey. The higher rachum al chamor. So if he's riding on this donkey, obviously it's somewhat higher than the ground, and he's moving along. The samastim chagdola, and he's happy as all get out. Now, this does not translate well in the English. He was extremely proud of himself. It's about the best that I could do. But dato gasa alav, the word gas is not a nice word. It's a kind of statement in Hebrew that gives the sense of somebody being very not only arrogant, but I would even go so far as saying arrogant and coarse. Coarse. So when you want to say in Hebrew today that somebody used a curse word, you say that they use milah gasa. They use a coarse word or a coarse word. So it's not merely that dato gasa alav, that he's kind of proud of himself. That wouldn't be so bad. Be proud of yourself for learning great amount of Torah. But it's more than that. There's an arrogance and a kind of position that he's taking in relationship to himself that is really far beyond beyond pride. It's a very coarse variety of arrogance that we're dealing with. Now that, if you think about it, if he's got all this arrogance and coarseness, they say because he learned a great deal of Torah. What do you think of that conjunction of ideas?
There's a saying: "Don't make the Torah a crown with which to adorn yourself."
Okay, so it sounds like, no, here's this guy. All of a sudden, he's showing some very bad character here, and they're saying, why is he showing this bad character? Why is Dato Gasal now? Why is he arrogant and maybe even coarsely so, as we see, very coarsely so? Because he learned a lot of Torah. Now, this is a very, very weird statement coming out of the rabbinic world, because you would imagine the rabbinic world would say, well, if he learns a lot of Torah, he should become more refined, or because he's more learned, maybe more sensitive. No, that's not what happens here. He's not more sensitive, none of the above. He is arrogant and filled with himself. And how do we get to know it? Just go on with the rest of the story. So picking it all up, Philip Rhodes or Marlon, whoever wants to. Yes?
Sure.
Yeah.
A man happened upon him who was extremely ugly. He said to him, "Peace be upon you, Rabbi." But he did not respond to him.
Stop. Okay. So let's see what the Hebrew has to say for itself. Nizdamein lo adam echad. Somebody happened upon him. But nizdamein is, while it's not barely translated, is somebody happened upon him. Nizdamein is more like something was prepared for him. This was destined to be. This meeting was destined to be. So nizdamein lo, well, it says a man happened upon him, which would have made more sense in the English, actually means this man was destined, this one man was destined to show up while he was having his nice little tiyul. That was the term that was used, a kind of pleasant walk, not actually walking on his donkey, along the river, and now he meets this fellow. Well, this fellow is Mechoal Bioter. He's about as ugly as you can get. Very, very, very ugly fellow. And what does this ugly fellow say to this person who is riding on his donkey and very proud of himself for having learned so much Torah? What did he say to him? Yes, go ahead.
Peace be upon you, Rabbi.
Peace be upon you, Rabbi. So we now know who's addressing who, right? We know that the ugly man is addressing this person because this person has been identified as a rabbi. So he says to him very politely, Shalom Alecha, Rabbi. Peace be upon you, my teacher. And what's the reaction of our man who's riding on his high horse and going along the shore?
He did not respond.
Lo tasilo. He had nothing to say to him, but he did have something to say to him. It wasn't that he had nothing to say to him. I'll take the next part here. Amareka, amaloreka, kama mechora toraish. Shema kol b'nei ircha mechorim kimotcha. Says to him, Reka, which means empty one. If I look at you and I see, let's talk about a wine barrel. Okay, for a second, let's talk about a wine barrel. I took a look at such an ugly wine barrel. What would I assume was inside the wine barrel? even the worst wine in the world, or the wine barrel had been allowed to rot because there was nothing in it. So essentially, this man is saying, Reka, given the way you look, you're empty. There's nothing inside of you. Come in the chora otoi. Boy, are you ugly. And of course, that's put in the third person, as if to almost distance this person from away. I have it here as peace upon you, Rabbi, but you didn't respond to him. Rather, he said to him, empty one, how ugly are you? I said, literally, is that man? How ugly is that man? So when he responds to him, he does respond in a way that should have been the third person, but the second person is responding to it in the third, which is a way of, pushing him away, distancing him even further. And then, can you believe this? He goes so far as to say, forget about you being ugly. Maybe everybody in the city that you live in is just as ugly as you are. So it's like, how many times are we going to insult this one person? It's like, I've insulted him. Why am I extending this to every single person in his community? So you're really seeing the worst behavior you possibly could see. And here is somebody who's what? Learned a lot of Torah. They've learned a lot of Torah. And this is how they behave. We're going to have to figure out why rabbis would write a story about themselves that really, that really wasn't so complimentary. So we're going to have to figure that out at the end. At any rate, she says the Bichoar, this ugly man, was not such a dummy. So afterwards, he makes a statement. Yes, we can have. Let's see. Judith Jaffe, would you read for us?
Sure.
I'll put the cursor if I can only wake it up.
He said to him, I don't know about that, but go and say to the craftsman who made me, how ugly is this vessel you made? Once he recognized that he had sinned, he got off his donkey and prostrated himself before him and said to him.
Wait, yeah, this is, when you do this kind of work, you have to read every single line by itself so you can get the full flavor of it. Line that you went ahead, no problem. But let's take it line by line. So what was the response? What was the response of the, after he got called?
Go talk to God. He made me.
Yeah. Why don't you have a conversation with God? Go to the craftsman and said to him, how ugly is this vessel that you made? Okay, now, next line, go ahead.
Once he recognized that he had sinned, he got off his donkey and prostrated himself before him and said to him, I'm responding to you, forgive me.
Okay, so let's pay attention to what's happened here. The place where people are in the story is very important. Very important. So where did we get Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon at first? Where do we see him first? Is he low? Is he high?
First we saw him high, and now he's low.
Okay. First he's on high, and now he's on low. Okay. So height and downward, high and low, are going to be a very important part of the story, and we're getting the first taste of it over here. This man has answered him in a theologically very, very smart kind of way. And now he says to him, no, if you think I'm so ugly, and you think that people in my city might be even as ugly as I am, you know something, why don't you have a conversation with God, and ask him how ugly this vessel you made. Tell him, he did a real bad job. So he realizes that he said something horrible to this man, and he gets off his donkey and prostrates himself before him. Now, where is he? Is he higher, middle, low in relationship to the ugly man?
He's low.
Low.
He's lower. Okay. So we've gone from up here, right? High, all the way down to below the person he has, who has offended. And he says, forgive me. Okay. Now you would imagine what would happen next. Don't read, don't read it. If you read, forget it. You know, what do you imagine would happen next?
Say, I forgive you.
My bad?
You could say, I forgive you.
You could say, I forgive you. Well, let's see. This guy says, Neneti, go back to the Hebrew for a second. He says, got off his horse and the minute he realized he really sinned against this person, Yarad min ha'chamor, got off of his high horse, I would put it that way, low, and he really completely prostrated himself, so really low. V'amar neneti lach. So he says, I'm responding to you. But it also has another possibility. Neneti, which is ayin, nun, hey, as a root, a three-lettered Hebrew word, root, can also have the meaning of I'm torturing myself. I'm torturing myself. Inui. Like we said in Yom Kippur, you have 5 inuyim, 5 ways of torture. Says I'm tortured by what I just said to you, or I'm going to torture myself on your behalf so that I can be forgiven for this. And the fellow says to him, should have said, okay, I forgive you. And he sort of does, but not exactly. Okay, so let's pick it up from there. Yeah. Who was my last reader?
I was your last reader.
Please, okay, continue.
He traveled after him until he reached his city.
No, before that, you have to
he
go.
said to him, I will not forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me, and said to him, how ugly is this vessel you made? Okay,
now let's talk about that for a second. Anybody have a comment that they would like to make about that? Is that forgiveness?
Well, no. It says, I will not forgive you, so I guess no.
He said, I will not forgive you, so it's not forgiveness. But what does he want him to do?
He's basically telling him that he offended God.
Offended God. And he wants him to go and do what?
Ask forgiveness from God.
Well, watch it again. I will not forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me and say to him, how ugly is this vessel you made? So does he want to have him go to God and have God forgive him? Or does he want him to go and?
How about to his parents?
He wants him to go to be critical of God.
Yes, he's saying to this rabbi, I don't forgive you until you go and basically curse God, or you say to God, you're imperfect. Go to the craftsman and say, how ugly is this vessel you made? So essentially he says, I'm not going to forgive you. I want you to commit what amounts to a theological nastiness in relationship to God. I want you to talk to God as if he was imperfect. He made something that was not perfect, and that not perfect thing is me. And I want you to go and say that. If you go and say that, then I'll forgive you. Essentially, he's given him a penance that no pious person would ever accept to do. nobody who really was a believer and did not want to kind of curse God would ever say, look at the terrible, ugly thing that you made, oh God, because the works of God are supposed to be at least pretty and maybe even perfect. So this was not an easy penance, and all of a sudden, our friend the Mechoar, the ugly man, is not such a fine person. So where does that put him? Now that we've talked about high and low now shifts from what I would say levels, meaning in centimeters or inches. It has shifted from levels in centimeters and inches to what? High and low on what scale?
Moral.
On the moral scale. And where has this ugly man now put himself?
Low.
On the same level.
He's put himself essentially at the same level as the person who just had a bad connection with. The other person is now asking for forgiveness, so he's low. He's prostrating. This person is saying to him, "You're not going to get my You're not going to get my forgiveness until you make a almost heretical statement," which now puts him, at least on the same level as the rabbi was at the beginning, or if not at that level, maybe even a little lower. Telling another Jew to be a heretic, not a good idea. So, where is the moral level that everybody has reached here? And we'll have to talk about that as we move on. So we're now, I think, everybody pretty much at the same moral level. One has spoken badly. Maybe one got up a little bit higher by asking for forgiveness, and then the ugly man has just dropped down to a lower level by making the forgiveness dependent upon a pretty much heretical statement that he says this rabbi must make before he'll get forgiveness. So now I really want to go back to the Hebrew, because the Hebrew is fun. All right. Yes. Hayam mitayel acharav ad shehigia le'iro. He followed after him until they arrived at his city. Can you tell me who's who here? Who followed whom?
The ugly man followed the rabbi.
Okay, that's a thought. I didn't say it was wrong. Certainly a thought. So the ugly man is now following after the rabbi until they reach whose city?
It's not clear.
Definitely not clear.
I don't think anything is clear.
Ugly man.
Okay, ugly man. Okay, maybe the ugly man, maybe the rabbi. Okay, let's see. Yatsu b'nei yiro likrato. So the people who were the citizens of the city came out to greet him. Not them, him. Vayu omrim lo, and they said to him, Shalom alecha, Rabbi, Rabbi, Mori, Mori. Peace be upon you, our teacher, our rabbi, our teacher, our teacher. You notice here anything that's funny about or weird about the language that's going on. They came out to greet, and they said, Shalom alecha, Rabbi, Rabbi, Mori, Mori.
Maybe they're referring to both of them.
You don't know anymore because there's a repetition. Who are they addressing? One person or two people?
Right.
Rabbi, Mori, Mori. So is it one person or two people that are being talked to? Hard to tell. Let's see if we get any more clarity as we move along. So Amar Lahem, L'miatem Korim Rabbi, Rabbi. Who are you calling Rabbi, Rabbi? Which one's speaking? Who's speaking?
It really doesn't say.
Doesn't say. No, this is, so here's the art of the Talmudic narrative, right, staring you in the face. What's so artful about this? They're not telling you who's who. This is a story where you don't know who the characters are. The protagonists are gone. So you'd wonder what kind of artistry there is here. But that's the art. That's exactly the art. So we're going to come back and take a look at, what's artful about it. What's artful about it is nobody knows who's talking about whom or talking to whom. So, you hear this, Rabbi, Mori, our rabbi, our teacher. Amar lahem, lama atem korim Rabbi. Pardon me, l'mi atem korim Rabbi. Who are you calling Rabbi? Good question. We don't know. It's totally unclear. We don't know whether they're calling the ugly guy. We don't know whether they're calling Elazar ben Shimon. It's completely hidden as to who is involved. So we're about to get to solve the problem. Watch. Amrulo lazer shemetayel acharecha. We're saying this about the one who's behind, who's kind of walking behind you. But who's that?
The ugly man.
We don't know.
We don't know.
You still don't know. So what
the future will tell.
Yeah, what's the art here? Give me a protagonist.
Does Mitael assume the guy's walking? Because Rabbi Elazar was on a donkey, right?
Yes, he was on a donkey, but Mitael just means moving along at a slow pace. Nobody's running. They're kind of slowly getting to wherever they want to get to. Yeah, like a tiyul. No, you're going to tiyul. You're not rushing necessarily to get to wherever you're going. Okay. So now we're going to find out, who he is. Amalo. This one that's after you. Israel. So he says to him, you guys are calling that guy a rabbi. If he's a rabbi, there shouldn't be more like him. There shouldn't be any more like him in Israel. Now watch the interesting pun that's being played out here. Said, if that's one that you're calling is a rabbi, al yirbu. Rabbi Yirbu. In other words, there shouldn't be too many rabbis like him. It's not only that that's a rabbi. Al Yirbu. Nobody should become a rabbi like him in Israel. So we still don't know who is who.
People.
And it's going to keep going. Amrulo. So they say to him, Mitnei ma. Why do you say such a thing? You shouldn't talk like that. Amar lahem, kach v'kach. Now you would think you would get the answer. You get, this one did this to me, that one did. Give me a plain answer. This one told me I was ugly. That one told me to blaspheme God. Yeah, here we are still in the same position we were before. Amar lahem, kach v'kach asali. That's so he did to me. Which no longer tells you anything about anything. I'm going to take us back to the English for a little bit of time, and we can come back and read the story as a whole. So let me see who we've got here. Well, we got me. Howard, did you read yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, so please do. And get you to the place where we are. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This
last line. Where should I start?
Right here. They said.
They said to him, "Why?" And he said to them, because thus and so did he did to me. They said to him, nevertheless, forgive him, because he is a person greatly learned in Torah.
Who? Who are we talking about?
And we still don't know. They could still both be learned in Torah.
They both be learned in Torah. We still don't know who's talking about. Is it this ugly guy? Is it Elazar ben Shimon? Unfortunately, when you read Sefer Agadah that was put together by why am I blocking this out? He's saying Chaim Bialik. How can you miss Chaim Bialik? When you read Chaim Bialik's Sefer Agadah, which quotes a story, cites it, he tells exactly who everybody is. This one is this one, that one. So you find out that the ugly man knows nothing, and Elazar ben Shimon knows everything, which of course is the prerogative of Bialik, but it also shows something about who he respects and who he doesn't. Anyway, so he said, for your sake, I will forgive him, but only if he ceases to act in this way. So who could be saying that?
Either one.
Either one. In other words, fine, I'll be happy to forgive him if he doesn't demand of me to go and blaspheme. That would be Elazar ben Shimon. Or the other one could be saying, I will forgive him if he stops calling people ugly and extends their possible ugliness all the way to their fellow citizens. So could be either one of them. Well, once we get to the end of the story, immediately Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Shimon entered this maybe the city, the synagogue, the Beit Midrash, we're not sure, and he preached. One should always be pliable as a reed and not hard as a cedar. And I'm not going to read the rest of it because the whole story is to get us back, of course, the first line. Who came up with this idea that one should always be pliable as a reed and not hard as a cedar? Well, of course, Elazar ben Shimon, who, got the story going, or at least that statement of his got the story going. Now, I want to go back over the story in its entirety and not read it from beginning to end because that would be not fair and take up time that I don't want to take up. But part of the reason that I think that what is going on here in hiding the protagonist, who is saying what, is because of something that we read at the very beginning. We have somebody who's coming from Migdal Gadol, who thinks of himself as a tower. He thinks of himself as very, very high. And the one thing that's going to happen somewhere in the story is Gadol. He's going to have to be fenced in. Because if he's not, then what we're going to find out is that those who are greatly learned in Torah are people who, by virtue of that, become so separated from other people and so arrogant that their arrogance almost flows over into being coarse. And we see coarseness in this behavior. This ugly man shows up. He's very polite. He says, Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi. Right? You'd expect that this Rebbe should say what? Aleichem Shalom. No, that's not what happens. He just doesn't answer him anything except some nastiness. No, empty one, how ugly you are and how ugly are all the people in your town. Are they just like you? At which point we still know who's who. Says, Amalo Eni Yodea. I don't know, that you're asking whether it's ugly as me. I can't tell you that. Go and tell the master of the world the one who created everything, that I am, that he created a faulty piece of a vessel here. And immediately, this Torah scholar recognizes that he's done wrong, tries to make up, and now all of a sudden, the person who should have been, gentle as a reed, this ugly person turns out to be hard to see. And he says to him, no, it's not going to work like that. You have to go blaspheme first, and after you blaspheme, then I'll forgive you. So we're up to that point where we know who everybody is. But after that point, there is nobody clearly identified in this story anymore. We don't know who's the rabbi. We don't know who is the ugly man. We don't know who's walking first. We don't know who's walking last. We don't know who the citizens of the city are addressing, and even which city we're in, whether it's the city of Elazar ben Shimon or the city of the ugly man. We have no idea. Everybody seems to be possible as being the rabbi, the teacher, and we have no idea as to who is who, and even the moment where we could find out maybe what did he do to you that you feel so strongly about him that you don't want him to ever do this again, he says, Kach v'kach asaru. This and that he did, which tells me nothing. So my take on the story is that at some point, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon realizes that he's the ugly man. Nizdamen lo Adam Mechoar at the beginning. It's interesting that there's one word there that's important. Nizdamen lo Adam Echad. One man, not two, one ugly man showed up. And I think that there's some point that Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon realizes the kind of arrogance that he has and the kind of relationship that arrogance is going to create in relationship to other people. That's not going to be very healthy, not for him, and it's certainly not going to give honor to the Torah that he's doing. So when you get this whole business of you can't tell who's who, the point is you can't tell who's who anymore because it's not who's who. It's not who is this and who is that. It's one person. And the one person is Elazar ben Shimon, who recognizes at a certain point that the thing that is ugly is a thing that's inside himself. It's a thing that's inside himself. He's learned a lot of Torah, but it has not made him into somebody who has empathy or sympathy for anybody. It's made him into somebody who's proud of himself, arrogant, maybe even to the point of coarseness. And he has learned Torah. But what else did he learn? Did he learn how to be a mensch? Didn't learn how to be a mensch. So eventually he begins to analyze himself. And when he reaches the city that he might become the rabbi, they're all calling Rabbi, Rabbi, Mori, Mori. And he's saying, who are you calling Rabbi? You're calling me Rabbi? I figured out on my travels that maybe I'm not exactly the person that you should be having as a rabbi in your community. And he said, well, it's really, we're talking to the ones traveling behind you. Now, there's a notion in literature called doppelganger, a nice German word. It means it's somebody who's your double. And this double goes along with you and is part of you, but kind of a separate part of you. With you, but a double. Exactly your mirror. And I think that what's happening here is that that Elazar ben Shimon is beginning to see what his face looks like when he looks into the mirror of this other piece of him that travels along with him. The one that's moving behind you, the one that stalks you, is this party who is you. And you are now beginning to discover that you're not very handsome. And in fact, there's an aspect of you that's extremely ugly. And finally, the people of the town, probably his town, say to them, nevertheless, forgive him because he is a person greatly learned in Torah, which of course brings us back to the beginning. Why was he so happy and proud and arrogant? Well, because he had learned Torah Harbe. And if we take a look at the line here, it will give you the same kind of statement. Yes. Am lo afal pikein v'cholo she'adam gadol b'Torah. He's great in the Torah. So, you know, he knows that that's the case, but he's not so sure that maybe that's the greatest praise that he could be given. But the people say to him, look, we need you. We need somebody who is greatly learned in Torah. So if you can't, you've got to forgive yourself. If this is a question of, no, I don't want to be a rabbi anymore. Lo yirbu the Israel, there shouldn't be too many rabbis like him in Israel. Then really what I want to do is, under your request that I serve you, become more forgiving of myself and be able to help you out in this way. So he said, for your sake, I will forgive him, meaning the aspect of himself that he realizes is not kind, not particularly beautiful, but only if he ceases to act in this way, meaning only if I stop acting in this way where I speak negatively about people that I should be much more kind to, have more sympathy for, more empathy for. Yes. There's a come up. Yes, Stephen.
It's a brilliant insight, Rabbi. I almost have the reflection here that it's a rabbi who's haughty. He's walking along the stream. He sees a self-reflection of himself.
Thank you so much.
And as he sees himself in the stream and he sees the self-reflection, he has an hallucination of someone who comes up to him, and psychologically he utters this horrendous comment, and then he's very hard on himself for making this horrendous, the worst comment. I mean, it was horrendous what he said, and then he realizes he's being too hard on himself. He has to be a little more flexible, that even a great rabbi is, not you, of course, Michael, but others will be imperfect. And you gotta go with the wind sometimes. You gotta go with the flow. And that represents the reed, because the reed is moving. It's not standing still.
Right.
And for that reason, the rabbi who has flexibility and is not hard on himself, that reed is so important in Judaism that it merits writing a Sefer Torah, Tefillin, or Mezuzot. So it really is, Michael, I think, a psychological self-reflection, which starts with the reflection in the water.
I don't know whether he had a illusion or whatever, but you know how water can obliterate the real picture. It's not a mirror. The water is coursing along, and sometimes if you do see a reflection in it, it's not a nice reflection. It's a
distorted reflection.
It's a distorted reflection. Correct. I love it, and obviously that's where I've been going this whole session. So you summed it up fabulously well. Any other comments or questions?
I have one. I see it a little bit differently. I see it that Elazar ben Shimon had 3 strikes against him. He was rude, he insulted the man, and then he insulted the man's town. And he shouldn't be forgiven. And he should have to do repentance. And in saying that, this pithy maxim that he comes up with, he's taking an easy way out. It's not as simple as that. It's much more complicated. He was horrible to this man, and he should show some more repentance. So I don't buy it.
Okay, so you don't have to buy it. Let's go back to the possibility that we are dealing with 2 different people. It's not a doppelganger situation. In fact, each one has made things hard on the other. That's the fact.
I have another idea.
But before you get to the other idea, I just want to comment on this one. Yeah, they're 2 different people, but they have not been kind to one another. In each situation, there's been an unkindness that's involved. I mean, if I said to you, Phil, you've insulted me, and the only way that you're going to get out of this insult is, to go and eat chazan. I don't know, something along that line. That's not an easy penance. It's a terrible penance for somebody who was an observant Jew. So, this is a big problem. But what seems to be at the end, if you're going to say we're dealing with 2 different people, both of these people turn out to be great scholars. Each one of them is a great scholar because the response, go speak to the craftsman that may be, is not a theologically simple statement to make. It's a very brilliant statement to make. So each one of them can be great scholars. When they arrive at the city, both of them are known. One of them may be known as the rabbi of the city, and the other one is known as a rabbi in general. Maybe Elazar ben Shimon is tagging along, and they say, "Oh, we know this ugly guy to be the rabbi of the city. We also know about this guy. He's got some fame, but this is our real rabbi." And then they have to work it out. Rabbis shouldn't be fighting with one another. They should be a little bit nicer to one another, and it somehow gets settled as long as nobody will repeat their bad behavior. So we're going to go with 2. We can go with 2, and simply say at the end, it would be that maybe Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon doesn't want to say it, but the truth is he's experienced that if you behave like this, you're not going to get anything, and you're not going to be able to write Sefer Torah Tefillin Emes and so, which I really haven't commented on and still wanted to, but we'll take more comments. Yes, Judith, I think.
We worked together, right, Michael?
What?
Long time ago, but that's another story. It's funny because you called me Judith. I buy both scenarios, but I almost wonder if this is going out of the way to prove a point, and it was a totally made up story just to go out of the way and prove the point.
Okay, for sure. There's as I started at the beginning, one of the biggest problems for the Academy is that they used to read these stories and say, okay, we can figure out something about Jewish history of this period by virtue of these stories. But of course, if they're just narratives, then you can't find anything about the history of the Tannaitic period because there's no story to be told.
Because very often we remember the story more than, like, in order to remember the ikar of what they want to tell us, they tell a story, so we remember the story.
Yes, and that's a way of reminding us of some, but all the stories tend to be didactic. And the didactic piece of this is that people should be kind, they should be bending, they shouldn't be so tough as to make life difficult for themselves and for others. I mean, that's the point. But how do you get there? That's my piece. The piece that I consider to be artful is, how do you get to that point? You tell this story and you confuse people about who's who. You know, is it a doppelganger story? Is it a not doppelganger story? No matter what kind of story it is, it will finally get you to what? It will finally get to, for your sake, meaning the communities, because communities need somebody. They need somebody to lead them. Said, for your sake, I will forgive him, but only if he ceases to act in this way. In other words, you're going to have to be, we need leadership, but we need leadership that is kind, that is civilized. And if this other person will only act in a decent kind of way, okay, fine, I'll forgive him. But that's a very, very...
But maybe that's the point.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the point. If we identified the people, we might get hung up with those people.
Right.
We would research their parents and their children and who are they married to, and blah, blah, blah. But this way, it's person X and person Y, and we have no idea if they're real or one person or two people. We're just focusing on this bubble mice, so that the story at the end, the ikar at the end is what we remember.
Right.
Well, one of the words that keeps coming through my head as I listen to you is self-incrimination, and it seems to me, if you're talking about a leveling of the playing field where all people in a community contribute to conflict. No one is without guilt. So it's only until people begin to recognize that they are as much of the problem as the problem in itself do you start getting a kind of harmony in the community. I don't know if that's in what you're trying to show us, but
well, I think one of the things that is so here is that these two people, if they were two people, or this one person is one person with a, looking at an aspect of himself, either way that we read the story, when it comes to, they said to him, nevertheless forgive him because he is a person greatly learned in Torah. What they're saying is the only real way of solving this problem is not going to be by breastfeeding on the part of one person and castigating on the side of the other person if it's two people, or looking at oneself with guilt forever and ever. You don't get leadership in those kinds of situations when people are either still at each other's throats, or whether they feel so unworthy that they can never be in a leadership position. And that's why I think the community is so important in the story. They said to him, nevertheless, forgive him, whoever it is, because he is a person greatly learned in Torah. In other words, we need the leadership for our community, and our community needs the leadership in Torah, because that's the kind of community we are. And if we can't get that, we're going to be in some serious problems. So, either you're going to have to forgive yourself and make yourself available to us as somebody who has some pride in themselves and not just thinking of themselves as a horrible sinner, or if it's, two of them, the two of them have to make up, because if you don't make up, the end result is the community is going to be at a loss for the leadership it needs in terms of the civilization it lives by, which is the Torah. And so they do kind of make up. He said, for your sake, I will forgive him. In other words, it is because of the community that I will take this action of forgiving. It's not an easy give. And I don't think forgiving oneself is an easy give. And I don't think forgiving others who have hurt us is particularly easy to do. but whoever it is, but only if he ceases to act in this way. So if from this point on, either I won't be so arrogant and vulgar, or both of us will not be so hard with each other in terms of making it possible to be forgiving. If we all stop behaving this way, maybe we're going to get somewhere, which is really what I think is the final piece of this. But it really takes the intervention of the community who says, we will be at a tremendous loss if you guys or you guy doesn't settle whatever problems that you may have with yourself or with each other. So once he got the message, immediately Rebbe Elazar ben Shimon, and now I want to go back to the name. In other words, Elazar, God helped him. That's Elazar. Ben Shimon, hears something. God did help him, because the thing that he was told to do was what? Go to the craftsman who made me and tell him how ugly this vessel that you made is. So God helps him in the sense that he begins to understand that if he really is reverent and if he really is pious, there's not a thing he can say to God. And what does he hear? He hears that, something, you have to be more gentle than you are and not hard, because if you're hard on yourself or hard on other people, it's just not going to work out. And he finally says, or the Talmud says, it is for that reason the Reed merited to have a pen made from it with which to write the Sefer Torah, Tefillin and Mezuzot. Now that wasn't in the original quote. The original quote was, one should always be pliable as a reed and not hard as a cedar. So what's all this? Is this. This last piece, which I will keep separate, even though I lost the eye there. Want to take it back into the Hebrew and then again into the English. He says, okay, the olam yehei adam rach kaneh v'ayeh kasher ke'eretz. Ulefichach, therefore, zachar kaneh litol himena kulmus. Therefore, the reed was meritorious enough for a pen to be made out of it. Lichtov bo sefer Torah u'tefillin mezuzot. Now, if we want to take a look at the symbology, and there is symbol here, if you want to take the symbology of Sefer Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzot, what would be the symbols that we think would be going on here? The Sefer Torah would be the symbol of what?
Wisdom.
What?
Wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom. But I'm thinking about
laws,
where these things are used. That's really the key to it. So the Sefer Torah is written for the benefit of whom?
Community.
The community. Tefillin.
individual.
For the individual. Okay? And mezuzot?
The family?
The family. So he's saying that the last part here, I think, is really beautiful in the sense that if you don't have the right kind of leadership, if you don't have people who have solved the problems of the not so pretty pieces of themselves, or have not found themselves to be empathetic people who can forgive, sometimes even a hurt that's put in their direction, then they're never going to be able to be pliable as reeds. They're going to be hard as cedars for the rest of their lives. If that's the case, what kind of leadership are they going to be? They're not going to be people who are going to be able to handle communities, the Sefer Torah. They're not going to be people who are going to have decent relations with individuals that they need to, be sympathetic to or empathetic to. And they're not going to be able to help families that are in trouble or families that need to be built because they're just not the right person to do that kind of thing. So in a very real sense, this narrative, no matter whether you read it with two people or whether you read it with one person, is really finally telling us what Jewish leadership needs to be. It needs to be sane. It needs to be kind. It needs to be not ungeblasen, as they say in Yiddish. It can't be coarse and blown up and thinking only of itself. Real Jewish leadership, no matter how much it knows, Torah-wise, no matter how much it knows in terms of text, if there's not more than text there, if there's not a real person there with that text, then you can forget about the Sefer Torah, you can forget about the Tefillin, and you can forget about the Mizuzot. So I think in the real large context of the story is not about reeds, not about cedars. It's not. It's real. It's a real story about Jewish leadership and what it takes to be a Jewish leader. Either get yourself a good dose of therapy, personal or professional, or find out that in your relationship with others, you have to step back from a position of, I know so much more than you, you're so little, you're empty. You have to walk away from that, because if you don't, you're simply not going to be able to lead a Jewish community in a way that's healthy, reasonable, and productive.
I'd like to toss in one idea.
Sure.
I think Rabbi Elazar was the competitor for being Nasi of the Sanhedrin, and he lost out. So because of his arrogance, that
Elazar ben Shimon, if he the real one, is the son of Shimon bar Yochai. And if you remember some of the stories about Shimon bar Yochai and his son, who went away into a cave.
Right.
And when they got out of the cave, they looked around and everything they looked at burned up, because they were so involved with the Torah for 12 years. Right? Everything they looked at, all these people are worthless. They should burn up, because the only thing that's worthwhile is Torah. And what does God say to them? God says, "Would you please go back to your cave for another year, because you have to be bar mitzvah before you get smart." So they were there now for 13 years, and when they came out, they realized that you couldn't behave in that way. Except the younger one, right, Elazar ben Shimon, continued to burn up everything he looked at. So Shimon bar Yochai says to him, youth is always on fire with all kinds of things. Can you just calm yourself down? Because the world needs to survive, and just take it easy. Why? Because I can tell you, now watch the arrogance here. Between you and me, there's enough Torah in the world for everyone. Such a son from such a father. No. That's another narrative, which is a wonderful narrative to read. But I think you got the feel for, what the art of the Talmudic narrative is. This piece is extremely artful, because, just as I said, it hides so much information from you that you have to kind of tease out or think through. Am I dealing with one person? Am I dealing with two people? That already is a very artful piece, which leads to two very different understandings of what's going on here. And either way you read it, it's perfect. It's fine. It will work either way. And for literature to be that flexible shows a tremendous amount of artfulness. And who would have ever thought that, you know, the rabbis of the Talmud were interested in anything more than halacha? When it comes down to writing Agadah, they do an exceptionally good job too. And the art of their narrative is, as far as I'm concerned, as good as any art of narrative out there could possibly be. Any other comments? Okay, looks like it's a good night.
Oh,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
You and good night.
Very interesting.
I'm glad to hear.
See you next week.
You'll see me next week, and we'll be back with some other thing to tickle your imagination, to make you think about something else. But it won't be about ugly people. It may be about interesting and odd people, but it won't be about anybody that's ugly. Maybe stubborn, but not ugly. Okay, I'm stopping the share.
Okay.
Yasher Koach, that was superb, Michael.
Okay, thank
Good
you.
night.
Kol hakavod.
Right, have a good night. Kol hakavod to you for helping me out when we needed a little bit more of a depth on what was going on here, and all of you were quite terrific as contributors to this event. Thank you so much.
Laila Tov.
Good night.
All right,
Good night.